Hi, I'm Janice Switlo with part 27 of my book, Cede 2.0, regarding the First Nation Land Management Act. A good exercise Indigenous nations should be undertaking is identifying all those 50-acre portions of reserves that were carved off and, quote, given, end of quote, to enfranchised Indians along with other banned assets. Those are still reserves belonging to the Indigenous nations, as well as identifying and examining expropriations of reserves. The Crown cannot lawfully expropriate from the reserves under the treaties. The Crown can now lawfully expropriate First Nation lands under the First Nation Land Management Act. Section 26 reads, First Nation land may not be alienated except where it is exchanged for other land in accordance with the Framework Agreement and this Act. Part 2, interests or reserves in First Nation land may not be expropriated except by Her Majesty or a First Nation in accordance with the Framework Agreement and this Act. In my summary in Cede, I explain. My commitment is not as a judge of the decision-making or of the decision-makers. The decision is not mine to make. When it comes to the question of whether to preserve or deny beliefs, the elders can best assist. I serve only to remind people and to help them to understand what they are being asked to trade and for what in return, so that they can decide. With their chiefs signing into the Framework Agreement, First Nations make the representation that Her Majesty has title to the treaty lands. This means they have no belief in original title. They do not believe that the Creator bestowed the land to the treaty Indians. Rather, it means that they believe the Creator gave the land to Her Majesty and that she also owns all of the animals. So for longhouse hunters, the Framework Agreement says the hunted animal is not a gift from the Creator, but a gift from the Queen. After the new FNLMA regime, there will be no priority accorded these hunters under Section 2 sub A of the Charter to hunt for religious purposes. When the present-day descendants make such a representation as they do in the Framework Agreement, it says that Chief did not believe. And if he did not believe, neither did any of the other chiefs who followed his lead. The chiefs in turn represented their people. The whole territory thus falls. There is no Aboriginal allodial title to deal with, only the English/Canadian common law doctrine of the Aboriginal right of Aboriginal title. The latter is extinguishable, provided the test for extinguishment set out in Sparrow and Dalgamoot is met. The former is not. It is protected under international human rights, under freedom of religion and beliefs, and will be forever. The Indian land question centers on whether title is truly Her Majesty's. The Framework Agreement cedes that it is Her Majesty's. Suddenly, the Indian land question disappears. This attacking of the beliefs and religions of the Indigenous peoples is not new. It has persisted since contact. When the effort is underway, it is never openly seen for what it is nor disclosed. Indigenous parents were told their children would get a good education and opportunities to improve their conditions and strengthen their people. Instead, their beliefs and their language were beaten from them. It is no different with the new regime. The Indigenous nations will be weaker, not stronger, after its effects. However, if the new FNLMA regime is implemented with the people not realizing the effects until later, Canada will then find itself in the throes of a holy war. It will make events at Gustafson Lake, Ipperwash, and Oka look like picnics. The Honour of the Crown demands full information before Indigenous nations can give binding consent. I do not see this happening. What I hear Indigenous people want and think they are getting, and what I see them being offered and actually getting, differs so greatly as to suggest a repeat of history. My advice to Her Majesty's representatives, stop the trickery. It's not honourable. Well, it has not stopped. Quote, it's not enough to say I'm sorry for what I did in the past, and I'm going to keep abusing you, end of quote. Mark Kennedy with a question and answer with Murray Sinclair on how residential schools taught Aboriginal people they were heathens. Published in the Ottawa Citizen, September 26, 2014. Some are carrying on the residential school role like good Indians. Here is an example, passing a bylaw outlawing the fundamental human right to freedom of religion. Quote, The resolution read that the Council of the Cree Nation, and I'm sorry, I can't pronounce the name. It's O-U-J accent, Bougoumou, exercises its collective rights of the members who have expressed their concern with the type of traditional practices being done in the community, and declares that the Sweat Lodge, along with any form of native spirituality practices such as powwows, rain dances, etc., do not conform with the traditional practices and teachings of our elders. Christians in the community became upset by the presence of a traditional sweat lodge and organized a petition to dismantle it. Glenn Wapachee, Lana Wapachee's father, said the petition had only 16 signatures on it. However, those 16 seemed to have created enough momentum for the bylaw to pass. I was a counselor for 15 years in this community, and I didn't agree with the way they set it up and the way this was done, said Glenn Wapachee, according to another Nation article. His wife, Margaret Wapachee, noted that during the meeting in which traditional practices and ceremonies were outlawed, those who tried to defend the Sweat Lodge were prevented from speaking, and that Chief Louise Wapachee, Glenn Wapachee's sister, was very forceful in her pushing for the ban. The heated religious conflict has split not just the community, but the extended family as well. Margaret, Glenn, Lana, and the pro-lodge relatives feel like their human rights have been violated. In the meanwhile, an important question arises. What's next? Witch burning? This is by ICTMN staff, Back to Middle Ages, Banning Traditional Spirituality, Indian Country Today Media Network, January 1, 2011. A comment on this by WICA ZOTANKA was posted on January 14, 2011 at 23:48. Quote, truly assimilated and conquered are these people to deny what it is, who they are. Don't know for sure if Cree had the Sweat Lodge way back when, but praying in the oldenish way is personal and no need for a book written in English or priests of nuns beating you out of your own language, and spirituality is no way to have a religion of peace. In my neck of the woods in South Dakota, a leader had a dream vision where no arrow or bullet would take him. He fought to be a Lakota against anyone. In that dream vision, after he rode through the arrows and bullets, he was grabbed by his own people off of his horse. In real life in 1877, he was grabbed by his own and then bayoneted by a U.S. soldier, and thus the vision came true. To be an Indian is a rough life, difficult thing, my grandparents would say. These Crees have it rough, too, from their own. This person is speaking of Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse was one of those leading the defeat of General George Armstrong Custer and the 7th Cavalry in the Battle of the Little Bighorn in 1876, also called Custer's Last Stand, and known to Indigenous people as the Battle of the Greasy Grass. The last Sundance of 1877 was held to honor Crazy Horse 1 year the victory, offering prayers for him for what lay ahead. He was the honored guest but did not take part. 5 warrior cousins sacrificed their blood and flesh for Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse refused to be photographed, and he never signed any document. This was a time of the gossip and betrayal as Indigenous people tried to get the white people to purvey favors to them, being good Indians. Crazy Horse was 14 years old when he had a vision of a horseman riding with his hair loose through bullets and arrows, a red-tailed hawk flying above. He could see a small stone tied behind the rider's left ear. The horseman in the dream told Crazy Horse never to keep anything for himself, and always to look out for his people, especially the poor and the weak. But then he saw his own people pull the horseman down, grabbing him from behind by his arms. It has been said that in Crazy Horse's great vision on Bear Butte, he was shown how things would be. He saw cold, vacant white people with many houses, busy with work like ants. And on the edge of there, he saw Indians in shacks, wearing old white men's clothing, some lying around from too much whiskey, the old women so tired from the hard physical work. Crazy Horse could see that the spirit was gone from them, and knew it was the white men who had done this, holding his people down, taking from them. He became angry, but then the voice told him, "This had to be, but it will pass away, for all the people of earth must gather together like the geese that fly together in the springtime." And then he could see among those described, those few in who the spirit was still alive, in whose eyes he could see light, and he knew they were passing this on to a few of their grandchildren. Crazy Horse told this to his father, who reportedly said, "There is both bad and good in this vision. First, you saw our people conquered, crazy water ruining our people's lives, and our people being treated badly by the white people. But some still carried the dreams in secret, until such time as they could share the secret hope to spread new light to all people." Crazy Horse did not wear eagle feathers. He wore the feather of a red-tailed hawk. My son, not long ago, almost dropped his laptop bag. When coming home from university classes in a large American Midwest city, he rounded the corner of his sidewalk to come face to face with the red-tailed hawk who was waiting at his front door. They shared a good long look, he told me. I do not think he will ever forget the encounter, the intensity, nor the size of those talons. He was really checking me out, he said. I was told that his paternal grandfather's grandmother was a full-blood who survived Wounded Knee. Children who survived Wounded Knee, which was December 29, 1890, were sent to the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. Quote, "Assimilation also functioned as a way to deny differences amongst American Indians, to create homogeneity where there were differences, and to label them all as uncivilized and savages." Barbara Landis, a Carlisle Indian School biographer, writes, "There were kids who were Lakota, and there were kids who were Wampanoag. At Carlisle, they became Indian." The erosion of Native American sovereignty was swift and unrelenting. Propelled by a hunger for land, gold, power, and control, it swallowed up everything in its path, including communities, languages, and religions. No matter the Nez Perce were distinct from the Navajo, the Seneca from the Seminole, the Coeur d'Alene from the Crow. They were one in their difference. Anderson, 2000. Carlisle's assimilation of Native Americans also served two other purposes: preparing Native people to surrender tribally controlled lands and accept individual land allotments, while also readying them to enter the lower positions of the domestic and manual labor markets. As we will see shortly, the training at Carlisle's and the other boarding schools prevented the Native children from directly competing economically with the higher ranks of the United States workforce. Post-Carlisle's jobs were extremely limited. This was often protested by Native Americans, but policymakers ignored or didn't take their concerns too seriously. In fact, American Indians were not even allowed to become teachers for members of their own tribes, out of the fear that such a possibility was too dangerous. That was a quote from Cultural Genocide and Education, the story of the Carlisle's Indian Industrial School adventures in free schooling, freeschools.wordpress.com, November 14, 2008.